right, so this is Tactics Session 2. Did anybody have a chance to use the technique this week?
No.
No, I don't go anyplace. That's a terrible start. Do you remember what the first question was?
What do you mean by that?
I used in the the gym with some middle school black people.
How'd it go?
So they call that nigger. I just so what does that mean? They tell me. They call each other. They say, okay, that's because of the culture. Who define the culture? Basically, my point is you guys are brainwashed.
Yeah, true statement. So, any thoughts on last week before we get started? After you had a chance to, we're going to go to the video first.
I really liked it.
So,
I hadn't thought of it that way, but it makes a lot of sense.
I actually went to Google and then watched some YouTube, and it's basically, he used a lot of examples, the one on the books. He just used it repeatedly in different sections.
yeah, he has a radio show, and that's where you get a little more of him, real time use of this method, because this is his thing, his tactics. Everything that he does ministry-wise really circles around this approach, because, this is how he does his ministry. All right, so we'll just go ahead and play the video, and then we'll talk about it.
Hi, I'm Greg Kokel with Stand to Reason, and this is our second session together, Learning the Tactical Approach. Let's take a few moments just to review what we covered last session. I think that'll be good for us. First of all, we talked about restoring a missing piece, the bridge, so to speak, from the content to the conversation. You have a lot of knowledge, you may have a lot of information. How do you get that into play? Okay. Secondly, we talked about the tactical approach kind of in general, the skill of maneuvering in conversations and how important it is to have that skill to be a good ambassador for Christ. Remember, we talked about an ambassador having knowledge, wisdom, and character, and the tactics are the tactical wisdom of maneuvering. That's what we're talking about right here. The third thing I did is I encourage you to reframe your own thinking about this whole enterprise. Instead of thinking about going for the gold and getting the person to sign on the dotted line, winning them to Christ in that particular engagement, I encourage you to think of yourself not as a harvester, but as a gardener. Okay? Since season of gardening is always necessary before there can be a harvest, probably most of us are gardeners, not really harvesters, and that's where we can do the best good. I know I'm a gardener, not a harvester, okay? Now, with that in mind, I also suggested modifying the goal of your conversations so you wouldn't be worrying about trying to close the deal. Rather, your goal is to do something else. You just want to try to put a stone in their shoe. That's what I said. You want to just get them thinking. You want to annoy them in a good way. You want to do a little bit of gardening because there's a whole team of other gardeners that can help along the way in this person's life. You're just looking to do a little bit. So in a certain sense, we're lowering our expectations of what we want to accomplish. And hopefully, in doing so, it will encourage us to get out more and be more active in engaging people for Christ, okay? Now, we talked also about the game plan that I promised that I'd give you that would allow you to converse with confidence in any situation, no matter how little you think you know, or how aggressive or knowledgeable or even obnoxious the other person may be. It's a game plan that's very easy to put into place, and the core of that game plan is the Columbo tactic, that is using questions to move gracefully in any conversation. Questions keep you relaxed. They keep you protected because you're not making a particular point. You are trying to figure out what their ideas are. They're gracious. They're drawing the other person out. I mean, lots of advantages to asking questions. Now, I mentioned also that in our game plan, the first step of our game plan was simply to gather information. So when you're encountering somebody, you're going to talk to them about spiritual things. That's your goal. Don't worry about getting to the end yet. Just think about gathering some information. Before you gather information, you don't know where you're going to go. Once you gather information, there still may not be an opening, and that's okay. Now, the first step of that game plan is to simply gather information. And you do that by using some form of the question, what do you mean by that? Now, it's a model question. It can be asked in lots of different ways. Use whatever way is appropriate for the circumstances. And I gave you some examples last time about that. Now, in this session, I want to introduce you to the second step in our game plan. Okay, so we got step 1, step 2, and step 3. 3 parts to the game plan, all part of the Columbo tactic. So here's what I have for this particular session. I want to give you the second use of the Columbo tactic, the second step in our game plan. Remember, there's 3 steps to the game plan, entail 3 different types of questions. This will be that second step. And I want to teach you how to avoid a common trap in conversations that I call the professor's ploy. I'll also tell you what to do when you don't know what to do. Ever been there before? Finally, I'll show you how to use the Columbo tactic to keep you out of the hot seat. So this session is going to be really productive to teach you a lot of different things and show you the flexibility of the game plan that we've been talking about. Okay, here's the second application of the Columbo tactic. The first is to gather information. We use some form of the question, what do you mean by that? The second use of Columbo is to reverse the burden of proof. Okay, reverse the burden of proof. You might have heard the phrase before, but let me explain what I mean by burden of proof. Whoever makes the claim bears the burden. Let me say that again. Whoever makes the claim bears the burden. That is, if you are saying something is so, especially if it's controversial, then it really is up to you to give some reasons why people should believe you, why they should think it's actually so. If you're asking questions, of course, you bear no burden of proof. That's kind of the point of the tactical game plan that we're using right now. You're asking questions, you're in a safe situation. The problem is Christians will get into the habit of trying to refute every story or every tale somebody can spin. They're telling a bedtime story. They come up with some kind of story, and now they think it's our job to refute the story they've told, when in fact, it's their job to give reasons for it. In the immortal words of Desi Arnaz, they got a lot of splaining to do themselves. And so we want to get them to do the splaining, if you will. We want them to give the rationale behind their point of view. So let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. I was on a radio show in Los Angeles many years ago, the CBS affiliate there in town called KFI. And this is the shock jock radio station. And they wanted to bring the weird Christian in to talk about God and to talk about creation over and against evolution. So I was glad to do that. After we talked for a little while, they had the callers call in and I started fielding calls. One of the callers started to raise the issue of the Big Bang against me. Now, I know there's a lot of controversy in Christian circles about the Big Bang. I understand that. But I think part of the problem is Christians don't realize how well the Big Bang fits into their own story. The point is they believe the Big Bang. Let's just work with that. So he's throwing the Big Bang in there, and I told him, I think the Big Bang works for me, not against me, because Big Bang needs a Big Banger. I mean, to put it simply. Now, he said, no, that's not necessary. You don't need a big banger to get a big bang. You can get something from nothing. And so then he went on to explain it. And here's what he had to say about that. He said, no, I don't think it is. That is, I don't think it isn't a good argument from the Big Bang for God. You don't need God. Because, he said, you could start with a base of nothing. And you could say that there was nothing but an infinite continuous moment. Until one tiny little insignificant thing happened, a point happened in the nothingness. Now that's the problem, isn't it? How do you get a point in the nothingness? Anyway, maybe because it was a really small point in his mind, it was easy to do. Anyway, he continued, that requires no intelligence, so no intelligent God had to intervene. All we need is a tiny imperfection in the perfect nothingness that expanded, became increasingly complex, and soon you had the galaxies and planets spinning out of this. Now, apparently his point of view was you start with nothing, and nothing is like a placid pond. And then from somewhere, he didn't say, you get a speck of nothing that falls into the pond and annoys it. And it starts bucking and weaving and starts spitting out galaxies and planets and the like. That's his view. Now, I'm thinking, I got to answer this guy's question, and I don't know how you'd have felt in that situation, but I knew how to respond because I pointed out the way the guy started. He said, you could say that, and then he spun his story. I said to him, you're right. You can say anything you want, but giving us good reasons to believe what you say, that's a different issue entirely, and that's your job. It's not my job. In other words, it's not my job to refute his story. It is his job to give reasons in support of the story. I don't have to play it all until he's given me good reasons to take his story seriously. Okay? Think about it this way. You know what a gauntlet is, right? It's a medieval glove that knights would wear. What did it mean when you threw down the gauntlet? It meant it was a challenge. The knight doesn't throw down the gauntlet and then step back and say, I win. No, the other knights are going to say, hey, you're just in the game. You just anteed up. You just started. You got to put up now or shut up. You got to show us what you got. And the same thing is true in this situation. When people make assertions, don't mistake it for an argument. It's not. An argument is a point of view, an assertion with supporting reasons. If they're just making an assertion, you have nothing to deal with, really. You want them to go further. You want them to give the reasons for their view. You want them to bear the burden of proof. And here's the phrase I want you to watch out for. The phrase is, I can explain that. I can explain that. So you're talking about something spiritual and some evidence for Christianity that you think points to God, and they say, well, I can explain that. Be prepared to get a bedtime story when you hear that. They just spin a yarn, and there's lots of different ones that they offer that they think are compelling, and they think in their own minds if they can just come up with an alternate explanation, then they've done a good job in refuting your point of view. But keep this in mind. An alternate explanation is not a refutation, okay? These tales that people tell have great rhetorical power. They're very effective psychologically to dislodge your confidence in what you believe. But these things have to go another step. They have to be put to the test. Not everything that's possible is reasonable. And this second step of our Columbo game plan shows that the other side has to do better than just have a good imagination. They have to have reasons. And so here's the key question that you use to reverse the burden of proof. Now, how did you come to that conclusion? Or what are your reasons for that? Or why do you think that's the way it actually took place? I mean, there are lots of ways of saying it, but essentially you are moving the burden of proof back on the person who has made the claim, and that's exactly where it should be, okay? Remember, the person who makes the claim, what? Bears the burden. Let me give you some examples of this. It's not uncommon to run into people who say, well, Jesus was just a mere man who was exalted to the status of the Son of God, say at the Council of Nicaea in 325 or something like that. I mean, this is Dan Brown's argument in the well-known Da Vinci Code, okay? The first thing that I'm going to do is ask my first Columbo question. What do you mean by that? That is, I'm going to ask him to tell me more. How exactly did that take place? How do you think that worked itself out? And let him talk, okay? Once he's done talking, it's not over yet. It's not enough for him just to give me his point of view. I've got another question. And the question is, why is it that you think that's the way it actually happened? How do you know that really took place that way? Now, we have the details of the Council of Nicaea. We know what happened there, and of course, that isn't what happened there. But I want to put that on him. How about people who say, I was born a homosexual? Well, I'm going to ask him, how does he know that? What do you mean by that is basically the variation there. And he'll say, well, ever since I was a little child, I remember having these kinds of feelings, and I've never had any different kinds of feelings, so I must have been born that way. Now, I know as a matter of fact that there's not a single shred of scientific evidence to support that notion. There is no such thing as constitutional homosexuality, and I'll tell you, every single person in the industry, whether they're pro-homosexual or gay or not, all know the same thing. Homosexuality is not innate. You'll never hear it on CNN, but this is the fact of the matter. But let's just set that aside for a moment, okay? when people say that they are born homosexual, I want to ask them, what are the reasons why they are born homosexual? How do they know that? And I'm looking for some factual evidence for that, not just an anecdote from them. How did you come to that conclusion? Okay. I've had people say to me, well, the unborn may be a human being, but it's not a person. Now, this is a move in the pro-abortion case. Maybe a human being, but not really a person, okay? So what's the question I ask? What's the difference? What's the difference? They're making a distinction between human beings that are persons and human beings that are not persons, and they're saying that some who are persons get the complete protection of the law and others that are not persons you can kill with impunity. They better be sure they know what the difference is. So I want them to tell me. I'm not taking it upon myself to have responsibility for trying to prove that all human beings are persons. They're the ones who made the claim that some humans are not persons, and it's their job to tell me why they think that's so. Okay? Now remember, the first question that we use in our game plan, what do you mean by that? That helps you to know what the person thinks. Absolutely important to know how to proceed. Okay? This second question, how did you come to that conclusion or some variation? This helps you to know how the person thinks. What are the reasons for his point of view? Okay? Does he believe things for good reasons? Some people have no reasons. You ask him that question and you're going to get silence again because it charitably presumes that you have, or rather they have come to a conclusion. All right? And a lot of people haven't come to conclusions about what they believe. They're just socialized to believe what they believe. And so you're going to get the sounds of silence again. Don't panic at that point. Just wait them out and see what they have to say. It might be a little bit uncomfortable. How'd you come to that conclusion? What are your reasons for that? They don't know what to say. That's all right. Just let them work with that a little bit. So they may be caught flat-footed when you ask for reasons, but at least your question gives him a chance to express his rationale if he actually has one. So remember, the two most important tactical questions that you can ever ask a person are, what do you believe? And why do you believe it? Those are our questions, essentially. Now, I want you to think for a moment. Just reflect on the tone of our questions that we've covered so far, the first steps of our game plan. These are engaging questions, conversational. They're probing. You're gathering information, but they're still amicable. And they keep you in the driver's seat while the other person is doing the heavy lifting, okay? Now, what I'd like to do with these two things in place is I want to explain to you about a trick that could be played on you that has to do with the burden of proof. Okay, I call it the professor's ploy. Let's say you're in university, and it's pretty common nowadays to be in a university classroom and have the professor bent on destroying the convictions of every Christian that's in his class. Sometimes they announce that at the beginning of the session. You're a Christian here, you won't be a Christian when I get done with you, okay? And then they take opportunity, even when it's not relevant or germane to the topic, to attack Christianity at every point. They might say things like, the Bible's just a bunch of fables, okay? Now, oftentimes you're going to have a Christian who's in a class like that, and they're not going to take this lying down. They're going to raise their hand, they're going to stand up, they're going to go after the professor, okay? Now, I think this is right-hearted, but I think it's wrong-headed because it violates a fundamental rule of engagement, which is this: never make a frontal assault on a superior force in an entrenched position, okay? This is just suicidal. The man with the microphone's got to win. And a professor in this situation always has the strategic advantage, and he knows it. So don't get into a power struggle when you're outgunned in a situation like that. Now, I'm not saying you should break off the conversation. I'm saying use your tactics instead. So if you were a student in a class and the professor says, the Bible's just a bunch of fables, I don't know what question might come to mind right about now that you might ask the professor. Right, what do you mean by that? And let him talk. Let him explain, give more detail about it. Fine. By the way, is that question a challenge? Is that question a head-to-head with the professor? No, this is what you're supposed to do. You're a student. You're asking questions. Okay, fine. So he explains it. Once he's explained what he means by that, I don't know, what other question might come to mind right now you could raise your hand and ask? How did you come to that conclusion? Right. Now, it might be, though, that the professor figures out what's going on. He realizes, there's the Christian there who's sandbagging, laying low, and he's going to call you out. And he might say something like, well, you must be one of those Christians who thinks the Bible's the Word of God, every jot and tittle. Well, look, I got a little extra time here. Why don't you stand up right now and explain to the rest of the class why you think the Bible's not a bunch of fables, but it's the inspired Word of God? Go ahead. Okay, now what has the professor just done? He's reversed the burden of proof on you now, if you're the student in that class. And why is that an illicit move under these circumstances? Because you have not made any claims. If you haven't made any claims and you're only asking questions, you don't bear any burden. The ploy here, the professor's ploy, is for him to make the claim and then to say essentially, you prove my claim wrong. Well, let me give you a piece of advice. Do not take the bait. Do not take responsibility to disprove another person's view before they have already given some evidence for it. They're making you do the hard work. Don't let them do that. Now, in that circumstance, you might say, well, Professor, you don't know what I believe. I might even agree with you, but I've never even said my point of view, so you don't know. I'm just trying to find out two things. I'm trying to find out what you believe and why you believe it. Unless you just want us all to take this on faith. No, you don't say that. I'm joking about that part. The point here is you don't need to be the expert in everything, even with the professor. You don't need to know everything. All you need to know is two simple questions, and that is, what do you mean by that? And how did you come to that conclusion? And if you keep the burden of proof on the other side when they're the ones making the claim, you don't have to have all the answers. In fact, I think you can be really effective when you know very little if you ask the right questions. And here's a little secret that I'm going to let you in on. I have seen this happen over and over again for myself and also with others who talk to me, that people have come in kind of so full of themselves and their sails are just filled with their own sense of confidence, and they're shouting and pouting off all of these things against your view. And then you ask them, what do you mean by that? Or you ask them, how did you come to that conclusion? And I promise you, you can, many times, not always, but you can just see the wind go out of their sails. They haven't given any thought to this kind of thing. They haven't worked this out for themselves, and so they get caught flat-footed. I've seen it happen time and time again, how the Holy Spirit can use just these first two questions. So now, what do you do if you get caught in a conversation, you've asked the first two Columbo questions, and you're still not sure where to go next? What do you do when you don't know what to do? And in my opinion, I don't think you have to do anything. There's no magic, in a sense, about this. If you follow the game plan, then it'll lead you inexorably to this wonderful conclusion where the person prays and receives Christ. We don't know what's going to happen. Remember, we're just gardeners. We're not harvesters, okay? In these first two questions, you don't need to know anything. Okay? You just need to know the questions, but you don't need to know any content. And it might be when you get to the end of these questions, you're done. The third use of Columbo, you need to know something, and we'll teach you in our next session how to use that. But maybe you've just gotten this far and you don't know what to do. Well, there's nothing wrong with letting a conversation just die a natural death. If you don't have the resources to go further, don't be compelled to force the conversation. Just consider it a fruitful, interactive learning experience. Even so, I've had folks go out after this much training. They've just gone out onto the university campuses for conversations, and it's amazing what you're going to learn just by asking these questions. You're going to be amazed at how easy it actually turns out to be, and that's the feedback that we've gotten. So you don't have to hit home runs. You don't even have to get on base, in my view. All you have to do is get up to bat, get in the batter's box. And the first two Columbo questions will accomplish that. Now, I want to show you one more thing that is an advantage of these Columbo questions. I call it getting out of the hot seat. Sometimes you're afraid of going further in a conversation because you think, oh, maybe this other person knows more about this stuff than I do, and they're going to hit me with a bunch of stuff I don't know how to answer, okay? And so you end up not saying anything at all. You don't want to get in over your heads, okay? You don't want to get pushed around by some aggressive critic that's blasting you with your arguments or opinions or information that you don't know how to handle. Okay, and I can sympathize with that. You don't want to get in that circumstance because once you get in that circumstance, who's in the driver's seat now? Not you. They are. You want to be in the driver's seat. Okay, and this next little adaptation of our first two Columbo questions are going to buy you some time if you find yourself in that situation. Okay. And part of what I want you to see here is I don't want you to feel under pressure to immediately answer every question or every point that's made, especially when the other person is coming on really strong, okay? If you find yourself in a circumstance where you start out in persuasion mode and you're trying to get them to see your point of view, and then they come back with information or arguments or points of view that you have no understanding of, you've not been exposed to at all, you find yourself at total loss for words, really overwhelmed by the information. They may not be overwhelming you with their personality, that's a different set of circumstances, but you just can't deal with this information. When you're in a situation like that, let me ask you first of all, who now is in the driver's seat? Not you, right? The other person's in the driver's seat, okay? I'm going to give you a move that will help you get out of this hot seat that you find yourself in, okay? And I want you to practice a little bit of what I want to call conversational Aikido. Aikido is that self-defense practice that you don't oppose the force of someone else. You don't push back. You just use their force in your favor, okay? So what we're going to do, in a sense, is let them keep coming at you, but we'll want to do it in a way that you will actually be in control of the conversation. So if you find yourself in the hot seat, being overwhelmed with information you don't know, you want to shift immediately from persuasion mode to fact-finding mode. You want to immediately become a student. And you can say something like this. You say, wow, it sounds like you know a lot more about this than I do. I wonder if you could help me out here and just do me a favor. Slow down a little bit. Because I really want to understand your particular point of view, and tell me more clearly precisely what it is that you believe, and then tell me your reasons for it. Okay, and I'll get a piece of paper out and maybe I'll take some notes because I want to get this right. Now, what you've done then is you've completely reversed the circumstances. Do you have any obligation to answer their challenge when they give it to you? No, you've already said, I'm the dummy. You're the smart person. I don't know what's going on. Give me an education. All right. And then they talk to you. They let you know what they believe and why they believe it. You might be taking some notes or at least making a mental note of it. And then you say to them, let me think about it. Let me think about it. Now, them's the magic words, and I'll tell you why. Because if you say, then let me think about it, do you have any obligation to answer the challenge? No, none at all. You're going to think about it, okay? So then what do? Well, you do what you said you're going to do. You think about it on your own, at your leisure, when the pressure is off. That's the best time to resolve these things. And you can go to websites, you can go to books, you can go to any other resources that you've used in the past to get information regarding that thing. Now that you got the point of view and the reasons for it, and you can work it out on your own. And then you'll be ready for the next time. The next time that person or some other person with the same thing comes up, you'll be ready to respond to that particular issue. And if you can respond to it by using questions to make your point, all the better. The key here is to get out of the hot seat, but still stay engaged and get yourself back in the driver's seat. Essentially, what you're saying to the person is, you want to beat me up? Okay. Just do it slowly and thoroughly, please. Now, is there anybody that you know yourself Even the most retiring, shy, bashful, skittish, timid, reserved, who cannot do this, who cannot say, "You want to beat me up? Okay, just do it slowly and thoroughly, please." No, anybody can do this. This is easy. This is easy. Now, you haven't won that person to Christ, but that's okay. That's not our goal. Our goal isn't to get them to sign on the dotted line. Our goal is to do a little gardening. And sometimes we find ourselves at a disadvantage, and then we have to maneuver tactically to stay in the driver's seat and make the best of the circumstance that we are disadvantaged in. And this is the way to do it. Those two questions, just the way I've described it. Remember, you don't have to swing for the fences. You don't even have to get on base. You just need to get in the batter's box, and these two questions will get you there. Get in the batter's box, use these questions, then watch and see what the Holy Spirit does. So that's the foundation. That's your game plan. Two questions. What do you mean by that? And how did you come to that conclusion? And with that, even though we've got lots more to talk about, I've already fulfilled my promise to you. Remember the first session? I said I was making a promise that I would give you a game plan that would allow you to converse with confidence in any situation, no matter how little you knew or how knowledgeable or aggressive or even obnoxious the other person happened to be. I've done that. If you remember these questions, you can talk to anybody. And if you forget everything from our session together, remember this. Take a tip from Lieutenant Columbo, always ask questions, right? So let's do a quick review of what we covered here in this session. First thing I did is I introduced you to the second use of the Columbo tactic, the second step of our game plan. I call it reversing the burden of proof. And remember the rule there. The one who makes the claim, right, bears the burden. No more free rides. We're not going to let people just say whatever they want and not have to account for it. And I taught you how to avoid a burden of proof trap that I called the professor's ploy. Never allow someone else to put you in the position of having to make the case when they are the ones who have made the claim, okay? It's his job to defend his own view with reasons or evidence. I talked about what to do when you don't know what to do. If you've gotten this far and you can't go any further, fine, let it die a natural death. Don't sweat it. Do what you can and let the rest go. There's no need to force the conversation, at least not in my view. And finally, I showed you how to use the Columbo tactic defensively to keep you out of the hot seat. And what I said was go immediately into student mode, take notes if you need to, and then invite the other person to tell you what he believes and why he believes it, and then tell him you'll think about it. And then think about it, okay? On your own time when the pressure is off. Now, in our next session, we will complete our game plan with the third use of Columbo. It's very, very powerful. And in the meantime, I want you to do some homework. This next week, I just want you to make some conversations with people. Make conversation using the question, what do you mean by that? Make conversations using the question, how'd you come to that conclusion? Again, we're just getting into the batter's box. We're not shooting any further than that. And then when you do that, you'll see what the Lord will do just with those two questions. See you next time.
So what do you think?
Very good.
So,
When there's silence on their part, do you just let that go, or?
I guess it's simply for them to if I guess if they're completely silent, huh? Then there's like, yeah, what do you do? Well, I guess we can say like, well, I guess, I don't know.
we're not trying to embarrass them.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, so if you got to be careful about pushing further because they've already
No, I guess-
embarrassed themselves.
Yeah.
When you get sounds, if you don't have a support for what you believe, it's pretty embarrassing. So you've already put them in a compromise.
They haven't even thought of
Why they believe what they believe.
So
You talked about at the end, what you do when you don't know, but when they're silent,
Yeah.
It's like-
He didn't say
you
anything
live for
about
the
that.
kill.
I mean,
What do you do?
well, I would probably redirect the question at least one time to try to see if you could pull something out of them. But I wouldn't give them a defense yet, unless you're prepared to well, let me share what I believe, then the burden of proof's on you.
Right.
Or maybe it's like.
Or you can say like,
would you consider
would you
my-
consider
my reasons
what I
and-
believe?
what
yeah.
I believe and
Would you, if they're like, they don't know what to say or nothing to say, then would
Are
you
you
be
open
open
to-
to
Maybe talking.
talking another perspective, like what I believe, because that, I have a different perspective.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If they don't want to, then they're gonna say
they
like
don't
yes or
want to,
no.
then-
If they don't want to, then it's dead.
that's
That's the end of it.
Well, Greg will get to that in a later session a little bit, and I know Frank Turk always talks about this too. He basically is, when you get to a certain point in the conversation, you have to determine if that person is reasonable or not. If they're not reasonable, there's no point going. So the question is, if you get sounds of silence and you try to redirect it and you still are not getting any feedback, it's no, well, no, then you can say, would you be willing to entertain a different perspective, or
listen.
or would you be willing to
listen to a different perspective.
and then you can lead them down a path a few notches. You don't want to go too far, because you want to see if they're going to listen to your evidence. Because if they're not going to listen to your evidence, you're just wasting your time. But at a certain point, you have to give them enough so you can say, so now what evidence would you believe that would make you agree with me? Now we have a conversation,
I
right?
guess I've seen a lot that on Frank Turk's like Q&As, he would say it's like, are you open to like if certain evidence? That's like, what would you consider
What do you
if it's
consider as reasonable evidence?
And then if they say no, thank you.
Yeah, you
Next,
don't even
please,
try.
because there's no point.
There's no point.
It's one of those. It's like, would you change your mind if
If I can
I
prove
could give a reasonable
proof.
Right. It would be weird for them to just be silent and then.
and they
Yeah.
would say no, I will still change my mind. So then
Well, they're just frozen in time because they got nothing to say. I don't know that they won't say anything, but they have nothing to say, right? But yeah, you got to discern if they're reasonable or there's no real point, and that it's still. They have to tell you what they'll believe, and then I'm going to give you evidence to support what you said you would believe. And we're truth finders as Christians. I'm not scared of the truth. The truth. Oh, I've been wrong.
again, if better evidence is presented.
Yeah, better understanding, better.
So yeah, so it's okay. So 32, the ambassador section. Oops, you went too far. It's not helping me.
This is the
The top one? Okay. So, the Columbo tactic enables you to escape the charge you are twisting my words. And that's one I've heard before, where you're trying to rehash what the person said, and they're saying, no, you're twisting. Well, so when someone offers you that challenge, respond by saying, how could I twist your words by asking questions? I'm asking for clarification precisely because I don't want to twist your words. I want to understand your view, not distort it. And I think that speaks kind of to the spirit that we're supposed to have. It's like, understand what they believe, and then just use their words. You don't have to, we often talk about straw men. We'll take somebody's perspective and then we'll modify it a little bit into what we call a straw man that can easily be knocked over. We want to make sure that we give them an honest presentation of their perspectives and then ask questions so it can take care of itself. We don't have to give evidence for why we disagree with it. Instead, we should walk down the path of letting them essentially show that there's a gap in what they're believing, and that's the power of the tactic, right? I like
that classic argument about the atheists. It's like, I don't believe in God. God, that's this. They have a list. It's like, I agree with you. I don't believe on that God either because that's not my God.
No, and I think that's important, is not to take.
Instead of arguing that there is God, I was like, no, it's like, I don't believe the God that you're presenting.
No, I like what he said. It's like, just because they spin a story doesn't mean you don't have to refute a story. They have to give evidence for why they are providing that story. And we've been taught to engage, right? Defend. It's like, no. Let them defend their own perspective. And then once they've crumbled, now you can come in and present an alternative that is more in line with the evidence that's available.
If they're open.
If they're open. If they're not, then the conversation's over. Someone has heard the conversation, and maybe that's the gardening you were meant to do. Yeah.
I would have been tempted to go professor. He said the Bible is just
A bunch of fables.
I would have said, is that a fable? But that's what we learned in first class.
Are you spinning things right now?
Yeah. Or how would you define a fable? And it's like you make them define it, and then you got to work it back. It's like, It's kind of like J.P. Moreland. It's like, it's all just a lot of hot air if it's not.
You can't tell the professor that because
I know,
he
you're-
has the microphone.
No.
You're at disadvantage.
No, I think in the professor's circumstance, the professor's ploy is just reversing the burden of proof.
Yeah, but
But
most people would
in a university
bait.
setting, you should never challenge the professor.
No.
But you can ask questions that allow him to bury himself. He may not like that either, but
No, but he said after a couple of questions, you might know that you're okay. This kid is like, doing something to me. Then reverse it like, okay, so you, and then you're like, you don't take the bait. That's what he said. Don't take the bait. Don't tell your perspectives.
It's your.
You're the one. You're the one who claim.
So you have
I didn't make any claim.
all right. So
Just looking at your perspective. You gotta have a say.
So let's go through some scenarios. Page 33. So consider the following statements. The only rational explanation for how we got here is evolution. You can believe in creation if you want, but that's all based on your faith in the Bible. So how would you engage that?
What do you mean by that?
How did you come to that conclusion? But you can see how disarming it is, right? Because it's like, this is a very contentious statement, but instead of challenging them, it's like, why do you think
Why
that?
do you think that?
Because you're confident in your perspective. You don't have to prove it.
Well, prove it. And make them explain it. Because some of them most of them don't, they just doing slogans. This is what people say, and then they just follow it. And it's like, they don't really know how to defend it.
Okay, how about this one? A fetus doesn't have self-awareness, so it's not a person. You think that a blob of cells is more important than a real people who are already here. That's a religious claim you accept without proof. There are at least three things in that statement that you could address. What would you do?
what defines a person?
Okay. I'm going to go right after the first one, the self-awareness part. How do you know that?
How do you know?
I mean, because we know from science that fetuses move away from pain
They do.
and respond to outside
Yeah.
stimuli.
They
So that's awareness. So I would go right after the first one.
How do you know that they're not aware?
So at what point do they become aware?
Yeah.
I
So
mean,
what do you think? So what do you think? What time that they will become aware? Then they have to explain that.
So people are sleeping, they don't
They're
have.
not self-aware.
so you, well, that perspective, you kill anybody that's sleeping, it's okay, right?
They're not self-aware.
But the last one, the religious claim, is also one. It's like, I haven't made a religious claim yet.
Who's making a religious claim?
Well, they're throwing that at you to
Yeah,
try to
yeah.
shut you down. That's a shutdown statement.
Yeah.
It's like it does.
Haven't said anything.
My opinion about whether it's the fetus is a person or not is not a religious claim. I haven't used religion as my basis.
It thinks that fetus is just a blob of cell.
Yeah.
So what do you think this blob of cells is?
I reckon you're just a blob of cell
A
too.
dog?
I reckon you're a blob of cell. That's every living creature. It's a
A
blob
blob
of
of
cell.
cells will become a person. This is this.
Yeah. Okay. Next one is the Gospels are a bunch of stories created by early Christians to get other people to join their religion. You fundamentalists just have blind faith in your Bible stories.
You come up with that conclusion. How do you know that?
What do you mean by that? And
Well,
what,
the
how
early
do you come up with a
Christians believed.
conclusion?
Yeah, I mean, those two questions, you can see how it would unzip it because it's like, okay, the Gospels are a bunch of stories. Can you give me an example? Oof, that's a hard one because they probably have not read it, right?
Yeah, they don't know nothing about it.
And what makes you think the Christians use these stories to get people to join their religion?
You know what early Christians believed.
Yeah.
Good question. Can you define what a fundamentalist is?
What do you mean by fundamentalist?
It's kind of like what you're saying. They say all these terms, like you have to look in the dictionary. What are you? Are you praising more?
Well, the problem, Joy, is the person using it may not know the real definition, so looking it up in the dictionary doesn't help you. You have to ask the other person, what do you mean by that?
That's what I'm saying. It's like they found all these words, they might not even know what it is.
Well, I tell you, I heard this misogynistic on TV for forever, and I finally was like, I have to figure out what this is. So I looked it up, and it's like, well, that's really stupid. It means the hatred for women. It's like, if someone is
That's being accused of it is married to a woman.
married and has
Mother and
children, has a mother, I mean, it's like,
how can that be?
well, if you're not, well, even women get accused of it. That's what I don't, and it's like, how does a woman hate another? I don't get it. Women have hatred of women. It's kind of like a okay. All right, so now consider the following questions if you're in a group and discuss. Okay, we did this. So, all right, let's move on to the next reflect for a moment, which is on page 34. 34, reflect for a moment. He has these little interjects that he's put in the notes, and that's, so I highlighted in my notes, it's like it's the other person's job to defend their view. It's not our job to refute it. I think that's really important.
So actually, I have an example before at work. This would have been like a lot like nicer conversation if I've known this, because one of my coworkers asserted that it's, you know, when Texas said that about the abortion thing, and she said like, well, that's very unfortunate. Then you take the rights of, you know, of taking the right of a woman. And I said something about it, but not this way. So it wasn't very, it wasn't constructive at all. It was kind of like heated argument. And so if somebody says that, then you can ask like what? Like,
What rights have been taken away?
well, they're going to say the rights to like abort.
Well, in that particular law, that's not what it did. The law only said that people could sue doctors that performed abortions. It didn't take the right away from the woman from having an abortion at all. It took the right away from the doctor, maybe. But the thing is that the narrative was wrong because it wasn't
Right of a woman.
it wasn't the right of the woman that was affected by that law. Well, it means
It's
it,
more like
No,
a
it's
doctor
like,
can
you
be
can
sued.
still do it, but the doctor can be sued up to how many years? It was one time.
It-
Oh, wow. Oh, yeah. Yes.
that was the intent of the law, was to make doctors accountable for that they are committing, right?
Relative of the lady. Yes.
Well, more importantly,
The grandparent.
the
can
father
sue.
or the grandparent can
Can
sue the doctor for.
No, that's right.
That's
That's what it is.
But saying you took the right away from women is not a true statement. Because it was written specifically not to
Oh.
do that.
The assistant of my OBGYN made some kind of assertion like she said like, oh, my doctor moved to a different state because it's like, because we're going backwards. I should have asked like, what do you mean by that? I kind of know what she's talking about. It's about the abortion thing. That's why she moved out. So there's free practice somewhere else. And I should have asked like, what do you mean by that? Because it's kind of vague, but I know what she's talking about, that we're going backwards. Like instead of being progressive, moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah. Moving forward toward what?
Annihilation.
Yeah. No, but I think making them clarify and then asking that probing second question about how did you come to that conclusion? Because if it's so bad here, why are you still here? It's always going to be my response.
I asked
I
somebody
mean,
about
if you think you think it's so bad here, then why did you move here 6 months ago from the place you were that was so horrible? And
Yeah, I told somebody that.
yeah,
It's like, oh, you should go back to
Yeah.
where you think it's better.
yeah, please.
And it was like a silence. And then silence.
Nobody's forcing you. You can move. Where are we on?
Oh, you skip one, but that's okay. I understand.
You want me to go?
No, that's all right.
Oh,
I guess because I still go to work, I see people, I get to hear all these assertions that sometimes before it's like, I have a coworker that said like, there was this kid that got raped in the news. It's a big news. And she was said like, that's the reason why I don't believe that there's God. And I don't know what to say. It's like,
Well, that's just, you have to be careful on how to challenge that because you don't know the baggage that person brings.
Yeah, yeah.
You don't know if they have experienced that. So you got to be really, when they confront things that you think are evil, you have to be very, very careful on confronting them. But these questions are really be useful. It's like, okay, so why does it make you say that?
Yeah.
And drill down a few notches, and then you might
know
expose.
what really the problem is.
Yeah,
And then
you-
maybe like have a relative that
Yep.
got
Yep. So,
abused or herself got abused or
but I
whatever.
think asking the questions non-threatening, and that's the reason I really like these tactics is you can say, I don't understand why do you think that's evidence
But actually,
against God?
I did feel bad that I didn't say anything because I feel like I have to defend that there is God. That's my conviction. But I was silenced. I don't feel good about it, But I was not like. Ooh.
But that's how I think this tactic works so powerfully, is you defend your view without frontal assault, because you don't know what's going on with them, right? But you can engage, and they know that you're doubting them because you're asking the question. I mean, regardless of the professor's ploy, they know you're doubting them, or you wouldn't be asking the question. Go ahead.
So actually, I give you best here. The best example is what is a woman? The people who interview. You can see all of his interviews, his questions. He never say anything in the conclusive claim. Just I was a woman. What do you think is a woman? Then I ask very deeply. I cannot handle the interview. If I interview, I will say I disagree with you. Like he never say his point. His point of standing. So he is actually very good with them. I remember. So he asked like a very stringent man. So what is a woman? And the man said, okay, woman is how do you define what is woman? Say a woman knows what is a woman. Mm-hmm. Now he said, are you a cat? I said, no, I'm not a cat. But do you know what cat is? Then ran away.
Yeah, Matt Walsh's documentary is funny.
Have you seen that one?
It
Oh, it brings you like your emotions sometimes.
Yeah,
There's a pediatrician there that I felt like you need to burn to hell. That's how I felt about it. It's like, what are you?
But-
You are so evil. I was so
But what
mad.
Walter's saying is true. Matt Walsh does a real good job of using questions to kind of disintegrate people's perspectives, because he asks the question about define what a woman is, and none of them would define it because they know that what they're
They can define it, but they don't want to.
They don't want to.
It's one of those.
well because
They will be canceled. Yes.
It's one of those. Is that okay? The homosexual. It's like when you date one. It's like no.
No, they said, yeah, it's fine, no problem, but since they say you're gonna sleep with one, no. No.
But yeah, I think the fear is one thing, and then once you put your definition out there, now you can be refuted. If you never, it's actually what we've been talking about. If you never provide evidence, your evidence can't be refuted. What Greg is trying to teach us is you
assert something.
don't let anybody assert something without providing evidence for their assertion.
Assertion, yeah.
If you do that, then
You hold that.
yeah, if you're going to make a claim,
Then
you
are the
own
one.
it.
You're the one that has to prove it.
And if you ask a question, they have no basis for it, you actually, the conversation is already tilted toward you, because whatever they said, they have nothing. And now they're on the defense. So now you,
I guess that's what they call it. Yeah, their assertions is the roof, but there's no walls. It falls flat.
well, that's what he calls take the roof off approach. We don't get that for a couple more weeks. Where, yeah, when someone has evidence, they usually have something that they're using as their basis. If you can remove that basis, now all of a sudden it doesn't stand on its own. But that's a more advanced tactic. We'll get to that in some of the coming weeks as he goes a little deeper. But I think for right now, the idea is just let them make their assertion and then hold them accountable for what they've asserted.
Improve their assertion.
Normally, the one who asks the question is the one controlling the conversation.
Yeah, that's right,
Yeah, that's what.
pretty much.
Yeah, that's what he means by driver's
Yes,
seat, right?
you are in the driver's seat, you're controlling it.
So his reflection is often challenges to Christianity thrive on vague generalities and empty, forcefully made slogans. The burden of proof rule obliges the critic to go beyond mere assertions and actually give reasons for their view. And you got to hold them to this, because if they can't, there's really no more conversation.
Yeah.
They're either being unreasonable, then we walk away, or they don't know, and now you've opened up a conversation that's useful, right?
Yeah, like what the guy said, it's like, there's a lot of bunch of contradictions in the Bible, so you shouldn't believe it. It's like, which one? Like, which one? Can you give me, like which one is the contradiction? Most of them don't have anything. It's just a slogan. They don't know anything.
Well,
They just heard it.
And if they do, then you can, you,
address
what you do is you
specific one.
you take the conversation from the universe down to one specific issue, and then you can address those, because we have evidence. We have reasons for what we believe. Like
Most of those though don't. Most people
the
don't have
assertion of a blind faith in the Bible is not true. We have evidence-based faith in the Bible.
That's what John said. This I written, so you know.
Go to the reflection on page 35. Yes. So remember, alternative explanation is not a refutation. I thought that's so good. Just because they can come up with, I can explain that, well, that doesn't mean they've refuted your claim, because they haven't given any evidence, because they can imagine something. Very imaginative explanation. I read these in science papers all the time. They call it science nowadays, where they come up with the origins of the universe or the origins of life. Very imaginative explanations, but there's no evidence.
We used to call
For
that
it.
science fiction before. Now it shows up in the science journals.
Yeah, it's amazing how many stories I saw in movies in the 80s are now actually what is presented as science in the science journals. But that's the state of the universe right now. So it is not enough for someone to simply contradict your view by offering an alternative that appeals to that person, even if it is a so-called plausible one, right? That might be a legitimate first step, but she must, or he must, take it further, showing why their alternative view is more reasonable than your view. And I think that's just fair conversation. It's like, okay, you have an alternative. Why should I believe your alternative over what I presented? And again, you put the burden of proof right back on their side of the table, and they have to give evidence. Because if they have no more evidence than you have, then it's a stalemate at this stage, right? The person must shoulder the burden of proof for their idea and not push the burden of proof off on you. The key is, what Greg is trying to teach us is, don't take a burden you don't have.
You don't have to prove them wrong. You got to prove themselves right.
Yeah, so reversing the burden of proof is not a way to avoid defending your own claims.
Well, I guess I remember what Bodhi was saying. It's like, I don't need to defend things that I don't know. I only defend things that I know or I don't believe.
Yeah, I only have to defend the hope that is in me, the things I believe. I don't have to defend Christian beliefs that I believe are wrong. Because there's things that Christians believe that I personally don't agree. I don't have to defend their perspective because it's not my perspective. So just stick with what you believe. So when we make claims, we have to defend the reasons we have made that claim. We have to, the responsibilities, so do those who challenge us. And that's Greg's point. You know, if we're going to make an assertion, we better come with something to back it up.
Yeah, yeah,
And people may shoot us down. It's like, I don't believe that. Okay, so what would you believe?
yeah.
You know, that's,
And then
what do you mean by that?
You up, then you said like, okay, tell me again, like what you believe, and let me think about it.
You know, but that's one of the best questions I've never heard it formulated that way, but how great. It's like, okay, you win is basically what you're saying, but instead of saying, I agree with you. I agree with you. It's like, no, give me more information, and then I'm going to go think about it, and we can talk about this again.
Yeah.
And there's nothing they can do.
No.
There's
They can't be like, no, you stay there until you say you agree with me. They can't say that.
They're like you're a dummy, like,
Oh, I like that. It's true. It's like, okay, I think you know more than I do. Give me the information so I can process it, but I can't process it as fast as you. So let me go think about it for a while. And no, it's a great assertion. All right. So there are expectations to the burden of proof rule. Some beliefs reflect self-evident truths, or they are properly based beliefs. And there are no square circles. For example, if a self-evidentially truth needs no defense, it means it's just what it is, right? Properly basic beliefs are those beliefs that are grounded in reasonable assumptions about reality.
Hard in this day and age when people are not in reality.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of what we went through the class. You have to make sure someone recognizes truth, because if they don't recognize truth, you have to build that one first.
Yeah.
You have to go through the law of non-contradiction and all those things to build a foundation. And if they won't accept it, then you're done. You know, I mean, unreasonable people cannot be reasoned with.
Well, even the Bible said so. Do not throw pearls into pigs. There's no point. No, there's no point. So if it's not, and don't push things that they're not ready for. So you might have to go back, way back, before you can start giving things about the gospel.
You start with verse 3.
Yeah, start with
Well,
verse.
His example is really good here. It's like, okay, an example is like, we are under no obligation to prove that we exist. Because if they don't believe we exist, okay.
I'm just your imagination.
Well, more importantly, how do you know that you don't exist? And you're talking to me. So if we don't both exist, then you have no reason to challenge that we exist.
That's true.
Their challenge actually refutes their concept. Or, you know, you have the reliability of your senses. Okay, it varies from person to person, but I can look across the room and see Walter, and I'm pretty sure he's sitting there. Your burden of proof is to prove that he's not, right? Because we all have eyes and we can see Walter sitting there.
Okay, this is crazy though, how people.
have to go deal with this.
But you have to take them where they're at. You can't go to where you want to be. You have to take them where they're at, address whatever they're struggling with, and then walk them through the process, right? Because if truth is a problem, then we need to just focus there. We can't be going.
We can go any further if they don't have the
Basis for truth.
Well, it might come back to what you said earlier. It's like when you get the deer in the headlights or that sound of silence approach and they don't know what to say, they might say something like, well, you know, that's true for me.
Yeah, they typically like would throw something like that.
But the whole point is that's not true. Well, but truth is not relative, and you have to address that. So why do you think truth is relative? And go through whatever example comes to your mind. And gravity is one of those. It's like, okay, you know, jump off the building or the ladder and see if you can defy gravity. If there's truth is relative, then you should be able to choose not to
believe in that.
Or, you know, I can what was it, the Avalenti said that you get burned and beat until you recognize that being burned and beat is not as good as not being burned and beat. You know, that's this law of non-contradiction. It's like you can't have it both ways, right? So unless given evidence to the contrary, the ways things appear to be are probably the way they actually are. And I think that is... This applies to the basic laws of logic. We need them to have any form of meaningful conversation. Basically, if they're not going to accept that there's logic and reason, then you definitely can't have a conversation, right?
Honestly, people that I've encountered different sorts of people. Majority of older people they agree that there's truth. They just don't say it because you don't want to be canceled, right? But they know there's truth. It's only the younger generation that are into this crap because they know. The older people know that, you know, there's a law of, I mean, and none of them would spout things like these. It's only young people.
Like 1 + 1 is 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, the millennials.
No.
Yeah. You say 1 +
Those are
1
the
is not
younger ones.
2. Try that in the bank. Try that in the bank.
The Gen X.
Yeah. We know there's true and there's false. We know that there's objective stuff, and then this, yeah. I've never experienced that older person would talk like, oh no, there's no truth. Nah.
Unless they're crazy.
I've never met one. How's that? Only younger ones. Younger ones. I would
Scroll
say.
up one notch. So this is a interaction that he has in the book. And we're just going to read a little bit of it. This is what not to do, right? So if John says the president is so foolish for withholding funding from embryonic stem cell research, and James comes back, preferably, I guess James is the Christian in this case, isn't embryonic stem cell research immoral? You see, you've both now made claims, and now you're in an argument. Right off the bat, and you can see how it spirals out of control because now you're going back and forth.
Yeah, that's what happened to me with the
one makes assertion.
that it's like the abortion.
So skip to page 39 for a second. This is the alternative to that approach. 39, one more, right here. So same conversation, but you stepped it back a notch. So James says, sure, they're human beings. John says, no, they're not. They're just protoplasm. Okay, so fetus is human being. John says, no, it's just protoplasm.
And when I thought we were talking about the
It's a twist on the same conversation.
embryonic stem cell.
Yep. So this is the argument about why you think it's morally immoral. So James says, yes, you're right. They're every bit as human as you are. I don't know why he reversed the James and John's. It's a little confusing. The first one, James, is the non-Christian. The second one, John, is the Christian. It's confusing. So instead of arguing, what do? So John says they're not human. James says they are human. I disagree. You and I are humans, but an embryo is different. Where do you go? So you've started wrong. How do you recover the conversation? Well, with a question, right?
Yeah.
What is the difference? Non-threatening. So what's the difference between an embryo and a human being? Most likely they'll go to the self-awareness next. It's like, well, an embryo is not self-aware. What's the next question? Or what make you come to that conclusion? And then they're going to have to spout something to defend that perspective. And there's no evidence, right? The evidence points the other direction. So you can get to the point where the awareness goes away, but they're still different because they can't live on their own. Now what would you do?
Well, what do you think of those babies that was born? They can't live by themselves and nobody like.
A baby can't fend for itself after it's born.
So do you think they're better than the embryo?
Yeah.
So what's the difference between the baby that's born that can't fend for themselves and then the embryo?
Yeah, a newborn baby and an embryo pretty close in their.
Well, yeah, it's just a different stage.
Other than they.
They're not completely developed yet.
Disabilities. People with disabilities can't fend for themselves.
That's true.
So I think that's where you have to, but you have to put it in a question. It's like, well,
Yeah, non-threatening question.
newborn babies can't defend for themselves. Are they different than human beings?
Then, yeah.
And so the thing is, I think you want to walk it down question by question as non-threatening as possible. See, me, I would want to come back the other way. It's like,
I might form it in a question, but still antagonist.
yeah, I'm a little too sarcastic. I have to learn the non-sarcastic version of these questions because it'd be like, a baby can't fend for yourself, so can we kill babies? And it's like, oh, that probably.
This is a little bit off the subject, but the self-awareness thing. My youngest daughter had twins, a boy and a girl, and they were like head to head in the womb, like they could see each other. And for an entire year, she died a few hours after she was born. They knew her kidneys weren't functioning and everything. But for an entire year, Easton carried a ball around, which I presumed reminded him of his sister. When he started crawling, he played holding a ball. He crawled holding a ball. He was aware that there was somebody in there with. I mean, I'm convinced of that because I saw it. I mean, it's like, wow. There was no other reason for that.
Well, you can see personalities in the womb. Our twins. I know exactly the behavior.
And the other one would just be bouncing all over the place.
One's a bouncer, that's Ayla, and the other one would be quiet, and every once in a while just get annoyed and just start beating on the other.
No, Ayla
was the bouncer.
No,
I am bouncing everywhere. When there was little space, it's more like Ayla just and Viola just like.
Even now, she kicks.
But you can see the personalities even in the womb, right? All right, so scroll up to the ambassador skill, page 38. 38. What? Look, keep going up on this page. 38. 38. Where are you? All right, so sometimes the simplest, most effective question you can ask someone is a variation of the question, how do you know, right? And I like these because it kind of puts it in your mind, right? Why should I believe what you believe? It's a fair question. What makes you think that's the right way to see it? A little more challenging, but it's still non-threatening.
Yeah.
Typical for Bible interpretation question.
I remember that. So when we have a Bible study, I will.
What makes you think that's the right
So
way
what
to
makes
see
you
Good.
think that that's the right way
I'll
to
take
see
a
it?
picture.
What makes you think? Why would I believe you?
And you should. You should.
Why should I believe?
I think the third one is even better.
I'm curious. What makes you think that's true? I have questions now. Yeah.
No, the third one I think is the best one. I need to learn to use this one because it's less.
I like number 2. What makes you think that's the right way to see it?
Yeah, see, coming from me, that might be a little threatening.
Why should I trust that your organism of your what?
This is a
Why should
cult
I
question.
trust-
Why should I trust your organization or religious leader? You say that to a Mormon, Joseph Smith, or a Jehovah Witness about, the Watchtower. Why should I trust them? You can even say that about the Catholic Church, for that matter. Why should I trust your religious leader over other religious leaders?
Yeah. Yeah.
Even within the Protestant
Yeah.
denominations, we tend to fall into this crap. And I think it's a good question, especially when they say, well, I heard this from XYZ. Well, why should I trust XYZ? I mean, it's a legitimate question to understand why the other person
It's more
trusts
credible.
that.
Yeah.
Well, no, but they have a reason why they trust that
Yeah,
person.
yeah.
You don't have that basis.
Yeah.
So the only way you can progress the conversation is to understand their basis for trusting that person. And then you have a foundation to move forward. You can use it for the cults, but you can use it in our own interaction because we've read something, we believe it, but I haven't read it. I don't believe it until I understand the basis for that belief, right?
Correct. That's true.
So when I tell you something, it's like you go, I don't believe you. I don't believe you.
I don't believe you.
Yes, I'm used to it. I've lived with that for my entire marriage. The first thing out of Judy's mouth is, I don't believe you. It's like,
It was like,
what?
I'm a mad person here. You don't believe me. No, I have to recalculate that. He's used to it. He's not mad anymore. He's like, okay, whatever. Do whatever you need to do to be convinced.
Page 39. What time is it? No, I need to speed things up. Sorry. These are fun. So going deeper, lower. So occasionally in response to your request for reasons, a person will quip, I guess I don't have any reasons. I just believe it. This is a remarkable admission that should
Yeah,
not
some
pass
say
without
that.
you asking another question.
Yeah.
Why would you believe something you have no reason to think is true? I love this question
Yeah.
because they think they just got out of jail
Yeah.
because they say you Christians have blind faith. We don't.
I think the best way to get out of this, I'll think about it.
Oh gosh, that's a real. No, it's really good. But I like
That's true.
I like what he's doing. Don't let them
would
off
you
the hook
believe?
so easily.
Why would you believe
Just because.
something you have no reason to think is true?
Basta. In Filipino, it's basta. Just because.
No, so all right. Let's skip a little bit because we're running slow. I'm trying to figure out. Page 44. The ambassador skills. I like these ambassador skills because it kind of brings the concept home a little bit. This is narrating the debate. Many people you talk to will struggle when you turn the tables and ask them to provide evidence for their views. That's what we talked about earlier. But we're not trying to shut down the conversation. We're trying to encourage the conversation,
I
right?
understand. I've been on the other side of that, the one with the deer. It triggered me actually to look because, like, yeah, I hold this belief, but
I don't have no
We don't
reason.
have a
No,
reason.
tell Connie your story. It's a good example of
Yeah,
this.
it's one example is the what did Jesus preach?
Push. There you go.
That question, like, what did Jesus preach? Was what is the gospel? The question of what is the gospel? But my typical answer before is the death and resurrection of Christ. It's like, and then it's like, what is Jesus? What is the gospel that Jesus preached?
Hey, brother.
It had me to think.
Well, and the questions like this are useful. I love questions like this because it makes me think deeper about something that maybe I've taken for granted and I have not formulated a full understanding of. So we need to be generous with the people we're having conversations with. Just because we get the upper hand doesn't mean we don't want to exploit it in a negative way, right?
Yeah.
We're trying to help.
If you make it a goal that you want them to be
Yeah,
to the level that you're understanding, you gotta be patient.
you're encouraging
You're not there.
conversation.
They're not there.
Encouraging conversation for better understanding. So they'll try to change the subject or simply assert their views, sometimes because they haven't thought much about the issue you're discussing. Dodging your question may be their only recourse. It is critical you narrate the debate at this point. You take a moment to stop and describe to them what's going on in the conversation. This will help your friend or the others that are listening to see how they've gotten off course. So you can say, hold on. First, you made a fairly controversial statement, which I ask you to clarify and defend, which is what we've done with our first two questions. So far, you haven't done that. You've just taken off in another direction. Before we move on that new topic, let's finish the first one. So you don't let them off the hook. So don't let your friend get off the hook by dodging the issues. The tactical approach keeps the pressure on while keeping the conversation cordial. Encourage your friend to clarify themselves. This often is the first step toward changing their mind. So they want out of the conversation they started. You don't have to let them out so easily, and you shouldn't let them change the subject.
It's very good at that. Yeah, they change the subject to completely get off the hook.
Or you bring up something that is completely unrelated.
Well, that's you're changing the subject.
Right. So the key is keep bringing it back, and this is the idea of narrating the debate. Keep coming back to the topic that you want to talk about, right? You don't let the other person dictate the topic, because then you may go everywhere. They started it.
They started an assertion, so you go back there.
So the idea is they've made a claim of some sort, and there's two questions that we've learned in the videos so far. One is, what do you mean by that? Or some variation. When they make a claim to you, burden of proof is on them to give evidence. When they explain what it is and why what it is that they mean by that, the next thing you come back is, what makes you think that, right? It's the burden of proof. Show me evidence. Don't just tell me a story. Show me evidence for the story. And that's the first two tactical approaches, is keep the burden of proof on the person that makes the claim, and don't make any claims. Make them narrow their assertion down to a specific topic. And now we're having a conversation, because now we're focused. If it's too broad, you're not going anywhere. But you ask questions to understand how and why they've come to their conclusion, and now I can address the specifics. And that's kind of where we're at. Because our objective is to help them understand where we're coming from. But we have to understand where they're coming from first, right? If we just banter, then it's just banter.
You're bantering in things that they don't even believe to.
Well, that's the thing. You might actually give them evidence to support what they believe is a false. So don't give them evidence for their view. Let them give you the evidence for their view. Let's go to page 45. There's a reflect for a moment, I think is pretty good. He talked about the Aikido, this idea that you use the force of their arguments, but in the way that you want.
Get off the hot seat.
Right.
It's the, okay, you want to beat me up?
Yes. This is the Christian turn the other cheek approach.
No, this is not quite that. This is like when you really don't know how to support. You're disadvantaged. The person that you're talking to has more knowledge of the topic that you guys are talking about, and you're not.
Yeah,
You
it's want
don't.
to be the student and
So
learn.
it's like, okay, let me think about that. Tell me about it first. It seems like you know more. Tell me about it. I'll write it, and then I'll think about it.
Yeah, it's what Greg basically says. It's like you're basically giving them
The way.
well, not the win. It's like, go ahead and beat me up and do it very slow and thoroughly so I can understand your perspective. That's the idea, is to give that perception of weakness effectively in a way that you can control the conversation. You can gather as much information as possible and then stop the conversation. And go back to wherever you and get research what they've told you, get informed, and now the next time you have a conversation with that person or somebody else that has that view, now you're ready. But I think we often think that we should never retreat, but retreat is sometimes the best thing to do if you're not informed.
Yeah, if you don't have the right tool, you gotta retreat.
Well, if I don't know, I can't actually,
How?
I can't even make an intelligent comment on it.
And you're gonna look fool.
Well, it's
you
like
make it up.
me going into medicine. When Judy's talking about the gadgets and medicine, and I'm like,
I'm a student.
let me write that down and Google that because I have no idea what you're talking about. I can't defend it. I just don't know. And we all have, there's things that, we have blind spots we don't have full understanding of. So
Go to a gunfight with a knife.
exactly. Go get a gun and then come back for the fight.
That's right.
It's a self-defense method where you use the force of the person and you shift the momentum. It's this idea that you don't have any aggressive. It's a defensive. Yeah. So when they swing at you, you take the momentum of their body and you shift it. It's this. So yeah, it's a self-defense discipline that basically uses the other person's weight and momentum against them. Yeah.
The Japanese or Chinese?
Keto is
Aikido
Japanese.
sounds like Japanese.
It's a Japanese. I've seen it demonstrated. It's amazing because they'll take a half step and the person just falls down because they try to hit you. Yeah, and you just shift your body weight and let their momentum carry. There's a lot of flips and trips and that kind of thing in Aikido. Page 46, ambassador skills. So, asking simple leading questions is almost effortless way to accomplish balance in the conversation. You can advance the dialogue and make use of the conversation for spiritual ends without seeming abrupt, rude, or pushy. Basically, you use questions to pull out of them what they believe and then lead the conversation where you want it to go.
But to get the leading question or whatever question you have to listen more than interrupt while
That's right.
making the talk.
Of course.
From there you can get
Where they're coming from.
line of thoughts on how you compose your construct your.
He has a
But for us, we don't use this. It's like
no. I mean, his tactic would be 70% listening, 30% talking, or maybe 80-20 even. And you almost have to keep that. I think in his books he talks about kind of keeping the ratio. This idea that you have to listen a majority of the time until you're at the point where now it's
It's
your turn.
to like present things.
But
Because
if
you have everything that you need so you're effective.
if you're gardening, the questions are the gardening, right? You're preparing the field for the evidence, and you have to keep pulling them down. But you ask a 3-word question and you listen for 2 minutes, and you ask a 3-word question and you listen for 2 minutes, and that is not the way. Well, definitely, the Filipino culture doesn't work that way. But no, it would work on a Filipino really well, because Filipinos are very interested in having the conversation. Oh yes.
Thinks that you're interested.
Yes. Yes. Passionately
You're
talk.
passionately about the
We have
topic.
this
Oh, yeah.
other views about the Bible, and then we discuss about it.
But I think if you could use a question, well, see, now she knows our tactics, it's not going to be as fun. You basically, what he's talking about is narrating the debate. Is you ask questions to move the conversation in a direction you want to go. You build your foundation, and you narrow and guide the process until you get to the real issue. Because most people may not even know what the real issue is. They make a claim, they make an assertion.
Or about slogans that they've never thought of it before. It really.
Well, remember Collins?
What do you believe?
His
Patient.
patient, one of his cancer patients asked him,
So what do you
so what do you believe? Because he's just like going through these slogans that Christianity is not real and it's just a bunch of whatever, faith-based, whatever, no evidence. And the patient asked him, so what do you believe? And he got to thinking, it's like, I never had one. I just, and just started looking, and then he became a Christian. Yeah. And that's just not. Yeah. Because he doesn't have no reasons. He just bunches of slogan in his head. And he got challenged. It's like, yeah, what do I believe? I don't have nothing. Let me look. He looked. I mean, if you're a reasonable person, you're going to end up believing God.
Right.
That's the conclusion. C.S. Lewis, the brother of
Christopher
Hitchens.
Hitchin, Peter Hitchin, his brother is a strong. But he has no. If you look at his reasoning, there's no reason. He just likes to talk and diverts the topic, and he has no. Oh my gosh.
You're talking about Christopher.
Yeah,
Hitchens,
He just diverts the talk.
Because he's kind of really good.
He's very
speaker.
charismatic, and
Yeah.
yet he never says anything.
He doesn't say anything.
Yeah, I liked watching debates with him. I can't think of who was it.
Address the topic.
Turek talks about his first debate with Hitchens. He's like, I just love this guy. And then I went back and looked at the video, and he's like, he never said anything.
I think some people, they respect some leaders so much that anything they say, they take it without confirming how true the statement that
Yeah.
it happened to some of us so much. We respect a kind of religious leader so much. Anything he says become law.
Yeah.
So when you are arguing and they now push you, like you said, narrow you down, you now realize, I don't have a basis. I only have it based on what I heard him say.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think within the Christian sphere, we're really guilty of taking what someone has told us to believe, but it's not our belief, because we haven't done the foundation to establish what it is we believe. We have somebody else's belief, and we don't even recognize that we do. We have to own our belief. We have to build the foundation for what it is we believe, or it's not really our belief. It's somebody else's what we've taken
Adopted.
blindly because
You
they
respect.
said it, and
And you respect that.
oh, I have so many of these that I've had to unlearn, because when I've gone to the Bible, I'm like, it doesn't actually say that,
Or the text doesn't say.
and it's.
So said so.
But it's shame on us, because our job is to do what John tells us in 1 John, which is to test every
Test
spirit. Go prove it. No matter what someone says, or no matter how much you respect them, you should verify it if it's something you haven't already.
That's what you said. When the angel of light comes to you, go check it out.
Go check it
And
out.
I think he used a statement in the scripture where it says, there are some people that they preach something to. I think Paul said they went back to confirm before they preached
Yeah,
to
it's
them.
Paul.
That's Paul, the Bereans. That's the
The
Bereans.
Bereans.
Yeah, we should be more like the Bereans, is what Paul
A lot
says.
of us, we don't do that. We just
Yeah.
take it and we run with it.
Yep. Yep.
But like with non-Christians, it's like they decide on their worldview, and then they make everything else try to fit into that worldview. Instead of, looking for the truth, they just want to peg all that into there.
Yeah. Well,
Follow where the truth leads.
They don't.
Well,
No.
the end, the really end thing for atheists is they don't want to be accountable to God.
No,
That's the
that's
end
it.
of it. Because they don't want to have God because they want to be their own God. Because if there's a God above them, then they have to follow. It will restrict them. And they, but because they want to be their own God, they to call the shots and,
all of us do.
Well,
But we
we
have to
do.
recognize that we're not very good at controlling our own.
Yeah, we do, but you know that you're not.
Yeah.
Those people just don't want to accept that. Like, no, not at all. That's why Peter Hitchen is a strong atheist, and his brother, he
Well,
started.
brother, it's like
the
that. It's like
Peter
if you're
Hitchen.
a reasonable person,
You're,
Christianity is where you're gonna end up.
you're Christianity is where you're going to end up. That's what he said. Because it's like, how did you
I tried the atheist,
convert?
then I tried all the
No, he
religions
tried-
in the world. It's like nothing
No.
makes sense.
He first,
Christianity
He
is the
was-
one that makes sense.
the brother Peter, he was first a communist guy. He adopted that, and then he adopted something else, and then he got into Christianity, and that's what makes sense.
It works.
He said, like, I don't have no crazy conversion that's like,
Like some-
it's just, it makes sense,
Wow.
The only one that makes sense.
It works.
And thankfully it does. Page 49. Food for thought. Now, this will probably be homework, because I don't think we have time to go through all these verses, but it was very interesting. Greg pulled out all these scriptures in the Gospels where Jesus is using this technique. So the technique's ancient. I mean, Greg did not invent it.
Jesus always asks questions, I know that. He always asks
I am
questions.
good.
Why did you say?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Why did you
You
say?
call me good teacher. You say I'm good.
But I went and read through these this week, and it's like, you can just see it. You can see, what did you mean by that? What made you come to that conclusion? You can see it in the way, so it's like,
was asking questions.
and I think Jesus probably knows best. So that gives a lot of onus to this approach if the creator of the universe was using it on the first century.
What's the commandment?
Yep.
It's like-
Well, think about how many times he reversed the question on people. I mean, almost, yeah. Jesus always used a question to respond to a question, either for clarifying or to expose the underlying issues, right?
Because
What
They
authority?
they had the knowledge of the scripture, but they didn't have the spirit of the scripture. They weren't doing it out of love or out of, the heart of God. It was just,
Yeah, about the motives.
It's one of
Motives.
those. It's like, so you're exorcists. What authority did it cast the demons?
Well, yeah, that's not on this list, but there are a bunch of these. Most of these are interactions with the Pharisees, like the
Publicans and
why do you call me good? I mean, those are the scriptures, and it's very interesting to see.
The law say.
Yeah.
Yeah, you ask them, so if they know what the law says.
But when you have the questions that we've been learning in mind, and then you read the scripture, you can see, oh yeah, this is exactly the way you should address these things. Jesus didn't get defensive. He knew the answers. He didn't. He could have overwhelmed them with his knowledge, but it's not the approach that he took. And if God took that approach, then it's probably the approach.
Well, he's the model.
He's the model.
I can
should follow.
Answers that you thought yourself sticks around versus answers that somebody told you.
That's true. If you come up with it yourself, you won't forget it.
All right, go to the next page. This kind of these next three sections are a little long, but it's turning the tables. So if you're placed in a situation and you suspect your convictions will be labeled intolerant, bigoted, narrow-minded, judgmental, turn the tables. I like this because this is a situation that I've seen.
Yeah, no, the culture.
When someone asks for your personal views about a moral issue, preface your remarks with a question. You got to protect yourself, right? The cancellation. So you can say, you know, this is actually a personal question you're asking, and I'd be glad to answer. But before I do, I want to know if you consider yourself a tolerant person. Ooh, this is a loaded. But you
them already.
you already
Yeah, you
exposed
already
them, right?
Uh-huh.
So, is it safe to give my opinion, or are you going to judge me on my point of view? Ask them right up front. And I think this is excellent advice.
Yeah.
Do you respect diverse points of view, or do you condemn others for convictions that differ from yours?
Yeah.
Ouch.
Yes.
This is what they're about ready
That's
to
what
do
about
to you.
That's about to do to you.
If they tell you they are tolerant, then when you give your point of view, it's going to be very difficult for them to find
Yes,
fault
that's right.
without looking guilty.
Because they already said they're tolerant.
This is powerful.
Yeah.
This is
We need
really,
to- we
really
need to know this
powerful.
Because I see this a lot. I'm like, oh, it's like this, like,
But the thing is, the moment they crucify you, they're exactly doing what they're accusing
no, but
you
you
of.
have to pull it out of them before you
Put it in
say.
hand before. Put it out there.
So,
I know, I remember, one of our nurses got asked that, so what do you think about same-sex marriage? But we know that those are two women that they said, they already told her that they're planning to get married, you know, and this and that. And she was like, and asked the nurse, what do you think about, you know, she didn't answer it. She said like, I'm not gonna say my opinion. That's what she said.
well, this is the example he's going to use. And this approach is especially helpful when someone asks you what you think about homosexuality or related issues. Go down. This response capitalizes on the fact that there is no neutral ground in these
That's
kinds of
right.
discussions.
Yeah.
You got to recognize
They're
it's
not
not. There is not neutral.
They think they are.
Everybody has a point of view he thinks is right, and everybody judges the point of view
That
of
is
the other person.
opposite. Yep.
The Christian gets pigeonholed as judgmental, but everyone is
It's
judging.
judging too.
So if you set the foundation for the conversation,
Yeah.
they can't call you judgmental anymore.
Yeah.
Because they're
judging.
waiting to do that because you disagree with them. So it's an inescapable consequence of believing explicitly, implicitly what the truth is, right? So this is a great
Yeah.
example
That's great. Yeah.
of where you set the foundation before you have the conversation.
Before you answer the question.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
No, I
No, I see this at work. Yeah, like people would ask things like that. And
Well-
you're kind of like, am I going to get in trouble here or not? You know? But if you say that first, then they're like, if they say they're tolerant, then go ahead and say, because they already said, if they get mad, they said like, I thought you said you're tolerant.
Being intolerable
Yeah,
right now.
or you accept diverse
so
opinions.
so listen to this next one. This is a scenario, right? We've been talking about questions you can ask to get things rolling, but sometimes a question is asked of you that is not really a question, but rather it's a challenge in disguise. So don't fall for it. Like this one. What gives you the right to say someone else's religion is wrong?
I got that.
You got this.
Question. I got that question. She didn't say it that way, but some sort of that's like, why do you think like other religions are, just leave them alone. They try to live a good life. They're not bothering anybody and blah, blah, blah.
So
So,
listen to how he deals with this one. So I'm used to getting this response from non-Christians, but once I heard it from a fellow believer, implicit in her question was the statement, a challenge motivated no doubt by her mixed feelings about the subject. What right did she, as a Christian, have to lay a claim to the truth of her faith, thereby making all the other claims wrong? And that's really what the fundamental comes down to. The statement, questions like this one are hard to answer because the person's intent is not entirely clear. You don't actually know which side of they're on. You're caught off guard, you're scratching your head, the remark has been worded like a question, but you're pretty sure that it's not one. So now what do? Well, often the best way to navigate this kind of situation is to simply point out that the question is confusing. I like this. Say, I get the impression that you think I've made a mistake here. Where did I go wrong? This will force a person to rephrase their question in the form of a statement, which is precisely what you want. Instead of being a question, make them formulate why they think what you said was wrong. Because it's been triggered by something you said, most likely. If it's blind, like the one you said, then you have to probably take it a little different. It's like...
Yeah, no, I know she's not, this is not the case. She's really like, why do I have to tell? Yeah, why do I have to make everybody a Christian? Kind of like, the end game of that is, well, why? They just leave them alone. They're not doing anything. They're trying to live a good life, and they're not bothering anybody. And they're like, you know, why? I think I
feel like
made an assertion that Christianity is right.
Well, instead of making the assertion, I think I'd go to Bill Wise's story about the hunting cabin again. If as a Christian, if I believe there's one way to get to God, I would be hating you if I did not share it. I love you. That's the reason I'm sharing. Christians share their belief, not because they're trying to dictate the other person's conclusions. They're trying to give them the good news. They're trying to give them the thing that they're so excited about. We're not doing it. Okay. Oh, sorry. Is it 4 o'clock already?
Yes.
Oh.
And because God loves us, He's very clear that there's only one way.
Thanks,
Because
Tony.
He loves us. Bye.
Yeah, we're running late. This is good though, so I hope you don't mind us going a little later. So yeah, I think the idea is assert that you love them, but you have your motivation. And if they don't care about your motivation, then your conversation is done. It really is.
Well, you just tell them like, you know, like what you said, like, why is your motive? Why you're saying that? You know, I have a good stuff that's in me. I have a good thing to share. So of course I want to share it. And if they don't want it, then they don't want it. Yeah. Yeah. At least I said something.
You sowed the seed.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's right. That's right.
I lost my place. Where were we?
Say, I get the impression that you think over there.
It did something wrong. Yep. So this forces them to refocus. So as I was confronted on the issue, I explained that the question couldn't be taken at face value. And I think it's honest to point out that I think you have a hidden agenda without saying you have a hidden agenda. I need to understand more clearly what it is you're trying to tell me.
Really trying to get to.
So did she really want to talk about rights, or did she really want to know who was making the claim and what my credentials for making it are, what my authority for speaking? That's really what people usually ask. And it's like, who do you think you are, and what is the basis, you know, your perspective? And honestly, it's probably not the first place to go.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like the Bible interpretation again.
It is.
Yeah.
It is, but the key is you want to shrink the claim to a focused topic before you get into who has the authority to make the conversation about it. So this is probably a fairly good place to stop. Let's do just a little bit of this last one. So maybe you're not consider yourself fast enough on your feet to keep up with someone who's quicker or more intense on the discussion.
Yeah, I am. I'm
Right.
not quick. I'm not quick to
So-
think.
It's no problem. You don't feel under pressure to immediately answer every question asked or respond to it at the time it's made. And I think that's a real key point here. Just because someone asks you a question, you're not obligated to be able to provide an answer. You're not. Because if you're not prepared to provide an answer, or you're not sure what the answer is, you should reserve the right to step away from the conversation and figure out the answer. And the other person's got to be, we have to do the same thing for a person we're talking. If they're not ready to answer the question, then you need to allow them the opportunity to go get information and then bring it back to you. Yeah, back off. It's the back off.
What is this?
Take a neutral stance.
Yeah. Like what?
So for tactical reasons, you may want to adopt the posture of a neutral observer. As I said earlier, shift the argument mode back to fact-finding mode. Don't engage in an argument. Don't do what we do.
Try saying something like this. Interesting point. Okay. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
neutral.
be
Interesting point.
Be looking for
I'd like to hear more. Like,
information gathering.
yeah, let me ask some questions about your view and reasons for it. So,
I can,
Understand you.
and then I can go think about it.
yeah,
And I
then
think about it
let me
later.
think about it. We can talk more later. Yeah,
And
we can talk more later.
I think that's the best way to handle conversation, because if you're not prepared and they're dousing with all this evidence and references, if you don't know any of it, you're not prepared to have the conversation. So it's like, okay, let's take some notes, let's ask a couple more questions to clarify, and then let's schedule to have this conversation another time. And I think that's actually the appropriate way to have the conversation.
Yeah.
And we'll get into a different tactic in one of the future, what they call the steamroller. That's the one that's just going to like try to blow you over with their information. And we don't want to be steamrollers, but we don't want to get rolled either. So when we get to that tactic, it's good to recognize it in yourself. We tend to be steamrollers, and don't do that to people. And then the other part of it is, someone's doing that to you, how do you step out of the way so you don't get squashed by the steamroller?
At times, for some of us, at times, it be as if we've been defeated. That, you got.
Well, that's kind of this last tactic he talked about. It's like, okay, you know more about it than I do, so inform me. And Greg uses this approach. It's like, so you can beat on me slowly, all right, and thoroughly, so I can take it in. But you take that tactic. You take away all the burden of proof from yourself.
And you
It diffuses. You become a student, fact-finding mode. And then once you've got the information from them, you stop the conversation and say, hey, now let me think about this and we can talk about it again.
Later.
And I think it's an incredibly powerful technique. And it's the right technique. And you have to be prepared if someone does it to you to honor this technique, right? It's like, okay, I got my information. Okay, time out. Now,
Let me think about it.
let's think about it and we can pick this up at a later date. So
Well, these are good suggestions.
Send him this again. On how to get that.
yeah, I'll send you a link. Yeah. There's a book that goes with it. This is the full book. And
Well, like last time, one was the study guide.
this is the study guide.
No, this is the book.
This is the book. There's more detail in the book.
But you said we get a study guide.
Yeah, the study guide is what we're going to try to go through. Yeah, it's Amazon and it's pretty readily available.
I like that one though. It's like, are you a tolerant person? You can say, I get that questions at work.
Well, before you share your opinion,
Tolerant in patients. I haven't got that question yet because they typically would consider me because I look younger. They think that I'm on that side. Most of them though. But I know I have a coworker that was asked, like, what do you think about same-sex marriage? And she dodged the question. She didn't share her opinion.
I think to make it clear, I would say, do you consider yourself a tolerant or intolerant person? That's the way I would say it.
Yeah.
yeah.
Because
Are you open to other perspective, opinions of other people? Are you open to that?
Well, you don't have to be the key. Are you going to judge me from my perspective, or is this a question where we're going to share our views?
Yeah.
If you're going to judge me, then there's really no reason to have this conversation.
I'm not going to share what I
But-
what I think.
But once they accept except that they're willing to listen, then they can't jump on
Yeah,
you.
They can jump on back on you, that why are you like,
You can
blah,
say
blah,
it's
blah.
underneath too, like,
I thought you said.
you're also, my view is intolerable.
Yeah.
No, that using that tactics for him, to him.
Every time that, okay, I will speak something ugly. No.
Let's close with a quick prayer, and then we can talk some more. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for showing us this technique. You did it when you were here, but it helps for us to have it pointed out to us so we can kindly and generously lead conversations, hopefully toward you, and help us to do this, Lord, so that we can remember when we're in the heat of that moment to use questions to lead people in the direction you want them to be. And I pray all these things in your name, Lord Jesus. Amen. So, yeah, tactics. No, I appreciate the little anecdotes he has in the study guide, because he doesn't do it in the video. There's like a 30-minute video at the beginning, and I'll post it online if you want to see it. I didn't do last week yet, just so I got busy doing other things this week, but I'll get them so they're posted. And it's so non-threatening, though, the way he. And I've listened to some of his radio shows, and it's very interesting. People get really antagonistic with him, but he is very. It's like, okay, and
Yeah, if you want to.
man, I need more of that character, right? And so it's good to learn from people that have the right character. Yeah. But he's a. I like the way he's presented it. It's something that I think we can learn and practice.